This was with thanks to Dr. Luo. She thought of Dr. Marishka Brown, who is the director of NIH's National Center on Sleep Disorder Research, a topic which is near and dear to my heart lately. And she leads the science of sleep and chronobiology and guides this research into innovative discoveries that improve health. She has initiated and led new research programs such as identifying abnormalities in circadian biology that are linked to heart, lung, and blood disorders. She has spearheaded workshops that showcase how sleep impacts the immune system, lung diseases, child development, cardiovascular disease, mechanisms, early neurocognitive decline, the microbiome, and health disparities. I mean, kind of like all over. Dr. Brown earned her doctorate in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania Center for Sleep and Circadian Neurobiology. Dr. Brown, we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Leora, for the invitation. And thank you to Yuan Lo, who it's very hard, very hard for me to say no to. And so as for the group, I'm just going to essentially walk you a bit through my journey from starting graduate school and getting my graduate education to now being the director of the National Center on Sleep Disorders Research here at NIH. It's located in the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And so, as always, we have to have the disclosures. The views that are expressed today don't necessarily represent the views of NHLBI, the NIH, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and I have no financial disclosures to present. So I want to take you back to the beginning, or rather to my beginning of where I started. So I am from Mississippi, which when I say that, people are always surprised because a lot of people haven't been there or don't necessarily know a lot of things about the Deep South. And so I give them a little bit of an introduction to who I am and where I'm from. And so I'm from a small town, or a smallish town, called Hattiesburg. It's about 60 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, it looks kind of like Mayberry. And this is a real picture of our downtown. It is always this clean and always this nice. This is just, the way where I grew up. And I love to go, even to this day, and kind of walk down this street, which is our main street. And growing up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, it's a university town, and the university there is called the University of Southern Mississippi. And so that's where I went for my undergrad degree. I loved Mississippi. Most of my family is there. I was very comfortable and confident there, and also I received a quality education there. But on my way to receiving my undergrad degree, I met an advisor, and everyone has kind of these academic advisors who help to choose coursework and kind of get you through the system. But my advisor was a little bit unique. She started out as an advisor, but ended up later on being more of a mentor to me. And, one of the things that happened is as I was meeting her, over the years and going through and discussing my career and what I wanted to do, about 4 months before my graduation from college, she asked me a question that no one else had ever posed. And so she said, "Have you ever thought about graduate school?" So at that point, I hadn't, but I was a very good student. I did school very well. And so I said, graduate school sounds like a good idea. How do I do it? How do I apply? And so we went through this conversation, and she really helped me craft my statement and get everything together to go to graduate school. And so I ended up at graduate school. So essentially, before even going to where I went to graduate school, is hearing conversations and going in. And one of the things when I was listening to talks and going to essentially attending scientific meetings and seminars, one of the things that kind of stood out for me is when people were talking about graduate education and PhD being the key to unlocking the future. And I realized that everyone on the meeting may not necessarily be thinking about a PhD. You may be thinking about an MD or some other form of education, but everything that I'll talk about fits within that context. And so, one thing that I realized with talking to people and really being cultivated by my advisor, who at that point was my mentor, was that unlocking the key to my future was graduate education.
Mhm.
And so I went from the University of Southern Mississippi, my small town, to the University of Baltimore, the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And so Baltimore, although not a big city, was much, much bigger than my town in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And it really opened my eyes not only to, different cultures and the way people lived, even though Baltimore is technically south of the Mason-Dixon, the culture and the feeling was very different, but also opened me up to different aspects of scientific education and scientific discovery. And so, even though I was in the School of Pharmacy and my degree is in pharmaceutical sciences with the emphasis in pharmacology and neuroscience, I got to learn about pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics and formulations. We were called across from the med school, and so I had friends in that space, and they were really interested in basic cellular molecular biology. And so all of these things really helped inform and form, my ideas about science and the person that I became. And so even with the research that I was doing, it was focused explicitly on aging and neurodegeneration. And I show this picture, even after all these years, I still think C. elegans is probably one of those most beautiful models. And I am a model organism person. I am a basic biologist. I was trained as a basic neuroscientist, cells in dishes, mice in cages kind of person. And so when I see pictures like this and realize the power that are in model organisms, they really have advanced, particularly the aging field, and a lot of the things that we know about neurodegeneration. And so being in it as a graduate student and really, again, expanding my worldview in science, both professionally as well as personally. And I next want to talk about, the transition for that and how a chance encounter essentially opened a new door. And so I was, again, being a very studious student, I really enjoyed it, and I actually listened in a little bit to some of the presentations yesterday, and there was someone mentioning about hard work. Like, you don't have to be essentially the sharpest knife in the drawer. In the drawer, right? Like you can cut. And so being very tenacious, being very focused, working hard, these are the things that help you kind of progress in your studies. And so when I talk about this chance encounter, I mentioned all of that about working hard is because, keeping an open mind with learning new things and really being, open to attending, or I was given the opportunity to attend scientific conferences and things, of that nature, and being able to be prepared for when a moment happens, which is why I call this a chance encounter. And so I like this quote by Louis Pasteur, in the field of observation: chance favors only the prepared mind. And this has kind of been changed a little bit in our current vernacular to shorten to fortune favors the prepared, right? And so that's what graduate school was about for me, was preparing me for a career in science, right? Even though it doesn't necessarily look like I thought it was going to look at this point, that's what it was doing. And so I had gone to a meeting, a scientific conference, and there was a person there. It was an aging conference, actually, and there was a person there who was talking about sleep and sleep as not a behavior, but sleep as a science, which is something that at this point in my career I'm really passionate about, because a lot of times people talk about sleep as as analogous to nutrition and physical activity, and it is, but sleep is also underlying physiology. And so, talking to this person about sleep, it really opened my mind, and that sleep really is this ubiquitous phenomenon, and that it's observed across all species, right? And we spend about a third of our lives doing this thing. We sleep, and we know kind of a lot of the functions of what sleep does or what healthy sleep does, but we don't really know kind of why we sleep. And so this chance encounter really did open me up to a new path. And so that person who I spoke to there actually was an investigator at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And so I actually went into her lab. And now this was really funny to most of my friends because for the entire time, the entirety of my graduate career, I talked about how I was going to move back south when I finished graduate school. I was like, I'm going to get my degree and then I'm going to go right back south. And the fact that I actually went further up north is something that my friends still tease me about today. And so moving to the city of brotherly love, I absolutely loved it. I really found myself, for lack of a better phrase, in Philadelphia. And I actually then moved to two other model organisms. So I started out in C. elegans and then moved to Drosophila and a mouse model. And not only did I expand my model area, but I expanded my research. And so I went from aging and neurodegeneration to aging, neurodegeneration, and sleep. And so while I was there, again, being able to network and meet people and attending scientific conferences, I realized that not only was I interested in the scientific aspects, but also my at that point my interest in science policy collided with several different things like the sequester that was happening at that moment in the government, and essentially having what I call the rose-colored glasses kind of ripped off of my face as far as thinking about I used to think that academia was not political, but now I realize that everything is political, and not that it's bad, but that it was just very different going from a graduate student to going to a postdoctoral fellow who was essentially going to be a research scientist in the sleep center. And so one of the things that I wanted to point out by saying that is like, some things, that could potentially seem like a major setback can actually be a setup for something much greater for your future. And so, my interest in science policy actually led me to what I'm calling a critical transition. The AAAS, who publishes Science Magazine, they actually have a Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. And so, this fellowship is for people who have already received their terminal degree or engineers who have a master's who've been essentially practicing for 7 years. But it really is about making policy savvy scientists. And so the scientists come to DC, they're in different agencies, some are in Congress, and it's really about bringing our science, our research, that know-how, everything that you learn in graduate school and postdoctoral fellowship and your academic positions into the policy realm. And so I like this picture. It was up on AAAS's site years ago because I still think that some of the things that I wrote down were absolutely appropriate. It was me talking to the future fellows about getting involved, networking, having a plan to make a difference. And having that plan, I think, is something that really is critical for people. Right now, you being in the undergrad space and thinking about your next steps, not that you have to know what you're going to do for the next 40 or 50 years of career, but thinking about being very strategic and very intentional about what you want to do. And all of that is based essentially on a vision and defining what your vision is and kind of what it is, what path. Again, it doesn't have to be, absolute steps, but thinking about what that bigger picture is, for your life, because there's, this quote, without vision, people perish. And so being able to have a direction or at least something that you're going towards can help you essentially attain that goal. And so I did the fellowship. After the fellowship, I actually really much enjoyed my time there. I was actually in an office called the Office of Strategic Coordination, which was actually located in the NIH Office of the Director. But being there, I had a 50,000-foot view of the science. I really enjoyed it, but I really did want to think about. I spent years developing this scientific know-how, and I felt like I was losing it. So I wanted to get back into the science. And so I decided to go into the program position. And so I was the program director for sleep disorders medicine for about 5 years. And then a golden opportunity, what I called it, actually presented itself. And so again, I was the program director for several years. I worked closely with the former NCSDR director was very open and flexible. I always was looking for new opportunities and ways to grow and expand myself personally and professionally. And then there was an unexpected retirement. The NCSDR director at the time had been the director for about 14 years, and there was an expectation that he would be on at least 5 to 10 more years, but then decided that he wanted to pursue other opportunities. And so it essentially left a gap. And there was a nationwide search for the next NCSDR director. It was a very hard search. There was, a very long, tedious interview process, but I was selected as the new director for the center. I'm coming almost on my year anniversary on November 23rd. And so just briefly what the National Center does, I realize the time is getting short. My office is congressionally mandated. We support research. We coordinate the activities of the center, not only with NIH, but across the federal government. And we also develop a comprehensive plan with our FACA committee, our Federal Advisory Committee, termed the Sleep Disorders Research Advisory Board. Again, that coordination is, again, we coordinate not only across NIH, but across the federal government. And it is my job to manage and be the nexus of all of this coordination. And so a little bit about sleep. Sleep deficiency is prevalent. Based on the CDC, about a third of adults in this 18 years or older report insufficient sleep. And individuals who sleep less than 6 hours on night per average have a 13% higher mortality rate than people who sleep at least 7 hours. And sleep deficiency has been linked to all types of outcomes, not only mental, but also physical, emotional regulation, attention lapses, all of those things, sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation or insufficient sleep has also been linked to obesity and diabetes. And something that's very much interested or of my area of interest and something that I'm growing and pushing forward as the director is health disparities. And as you can see from these maps where you have insufficient sleep tracking with obesity and diabetes, it's also tracking along the largest portion of where African American, the highest percentage of African American population is. And for those who may not know a little bit of a trivia, outside of Washington, D.C., Mississippi has the highest proportion of African American in the state, essentially in the United States. And so sleep health disparities is really something that I am quite interested in, how disparities in sleep actually lead to disparities in other health outcomes, particularly cardiovascular disease and dementia risk. And something that's quite interesting is that, again, we talk about the number of minority populations increasing, but the number of children of color essentially has reached where it's higher than, or actually in 2019, children of color actually constituted more than half of the pediatric population in 15 states in the US, and more than 2/3 of the pediatric population in in another 11 states. And so being able to, understand the health of this population is about the trajectory. I know we're here talking about aging, but we really should be thinking about a life course perspective. And so to wrap up, I talked about that advisor who turned into a mentor for my undergrad and graduate school, and that person is here today. She'll be speaking after me. And she has been a lifelong ally. We've been going strong for 20 years. And so I want to, more than 20 years. I think we're at 23 or 24 now. So I want to say a thank you to Dr. Yuan Lo, and I'll end with that. And thank you all.